What is good, everyone? Welcome into episode 8 of season 6. Today, we're going to be talking about some very interesting topics, and that has to do with counter king tech, Saturnian coded Chronal entrapment mechanism. I also am going to talk about how it hasn't happened recently, but for quite a few different times. I'm going to talk about why my peripherals are heightened like high definition. Usually I've come across this when I'm in sports. And that's because my adrenaline is flowing. I've been in other heightened. I've been in other high pressure scenarios, but for some reason, it's probably because after a certain period of time, my peripherals just enhance what I'm able to see. It's like I'm able to see more, and instead of just like with your peripherals just off to the side, it's there, but it's not there. Well, this becomes more like I'm able to see frame by frame instead of just in sync and how things flow. There was also a giant bug that I found on the Big Island of Hawaii. This was when I was in high school, and I had to look at it. I went back to the spot later and wasn't there. But this was like a few hours later, so, well, this bug was pretty big. It was about yay big. And about like yay tall or something like that. Is that thick. And it looked like a giant cockroach. But I was the only one that saw it, and there were literally people around. Literally people. And I was not on drugs. I didn't even do drugs until years later. Didn't even have alcohol. Nothing. And this was coming back from gym class. I'm going to talk about that. I'm also going to talk about the Magic Treehouse book series. I grew up with those books. Some of you may have as well. I'm also going to talk about VeggieTales, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and the Elves. And then, last but not least, Assassin's Creed. Now, reason why I'm talking about some of these other more simple topics, things that I enjoyed when I was younger. Some of them I still do. Some of them I don't even watch anymore or read. But I know some of you do. And I want to go in depth as to what those really are about, other than just what's being presented. I'm sure many of you have had some ideas. That being said, let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Now, there is what's known as Counter King Tech under the Iron Mountain in Vault Dionysius. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, there is a scroll scrambler arrays. Its code name is Theta Veil. So, obviously, dealing with the theta brainwave. If you're not familiar with the different brainwaves, there's alpha, beta, delta, gamma, theta. Might be missing one, but those are the ones that are the brainwave functions. But the purpose is to target individuals born with legacy scrolls connected to Melchizedek, Davidic, or Yeshua authority. Well, everyone has authority like Yeshua, but more specifically, those operating at a higher level that they target. And what it does, it emits synthetic vision noise false destiny simulations, and prophetic confusion. Now, the mechanism is quantum AI systems that use ancestral, geographic, and trauma-linked triggers to project alternative identity overlays, often activated during sleep or trauma cycles. I would know. I've had one specifically I know of. Others that I may not be aware of, if there are, but one I know very specifically why it was targeting me. Not going to talk about it. It's very personal, but just want you all to know that it's usually during sleep or trauma cycles. Mine was more during sleep. The spiritual effect, though, is disconnection from the Father's voice. It's Father Yahweh. Chronic imposter syndrome in divine roles. And delay of kingly commissioning. Now, there are also what are known as throne nullification devices. This code name is Seat Breaker. And this purpose is to prevent the activation of thrones in earthly or spiritual realms, especially tied to regional rulership. Now, the mechanism uses electromagnetic resonators to fracture the soul, body, spirit unity, inhibiting enthronement frequencies. It's stored deep in the Dionysian chamber, beneath a cross-shaped chamber built on inverted solstice-aligned architecture. Spiritual effect makes the king's domain reject him. So meaning that dominion, your authority gets rejected as an effect. Lands will not yield increase, and destiny cycles lock into what are known as pause mode. There's also bloodline hijack protocols, codename Anak Code Displacer. And this purpose is to hijack or reroute legacy bloodlines from kingship or slavery or servitude, especially or usually through covenants made in trauma. The mechanism encodes DNA echoes stored to crystalline databanks tied to Nephilim admixed bloodlines. And there's also simulated personalities are projected to create false generational curses that aren't yours. And the spiritual effects it repeats of ancestral bondage cycles, false guilt for sins not committed, and legitimacy stolen, particularly in firstborns. There's also crown suppression satellites, codename Luciferian Aurora Grid, or the original term of lag. Because the purpose here is to emit frequencies into key atmospheric zones, especially in Colorado and Pennsylvania, to suppress crown. There's different points in the body. And it's to suppress the crown area, the different points in your head from activating, and override the royal mind with false humility, performance addiction, or self-hatred. The mechanism here is linked to HARP and Vatican black cubes. It's interfaced with data from Vault Dionysius and Jesuit root server systems. The spiritual effect here stunts the maturity of kings and blocks downloads from Shemaim, and it promotes submission to counterfeit rulers or systems. There's also womb seal encryption. Its codename is Lilith Covenant Codex. And the purpose here is to corrupt or program wombs to reject true heirs, or to produce children tied to alternate scrolls. The mechanism here is deployed through dream state encounters, ritual trauma, or spiritual contracts. It's stored in what's known as the Rose Chamber, a synthetic womb archive in Vault Dionysius. Yeah, I think that's how it is. Dionysius. Spiritual effects with this one is that it breaks kingdom family lineages, delays births of chosen ones, and it generates miscarriages or lineage substitutions. Now, it's not to say that there aren't other things that you can use to have miscarriages, like the type of fabric that you wear, maybe too much of something that you eat. That can also be an effect. I'm just saying that this technology plays that part. And there's also what's known as false king thrones, codename Archonic Seat Mirrors, and its purpose is to implant false thrones into chosen individuals designed to mimic heavenly authority while feeding demonic realms. The mechanism here is spiritual architecture embedded through trauma-based programming or religious idolatry. It mimics calling, but pulls power from inverted grids. The spiritual effect here gives rise to charismatic but compromised leaders. It enables counterfeit apostles, prophets, and kings. And it siphons influence meant for true sons. So now you got an idea of why some people are the way that they are. It's because of technology that's used against them. And most likely they're not even aware of what the technology is used against them. But it still doesn't make it right with some of the stuff they're doing. The people that are put into those false thrones, because they still do things they shouldn't be doing. But how they're used is that Vault Dionysius isn't merely a storage hub. It's an active operations center tied to Cheyenne Mountain, NORAD Interface, Jesuit, Vatican, Black Cube Consortium, as well as DARPA AI Synthesis, Unite Analyzing Divine Blueprints. Now they use this tech to locate emerging king lines, or king line candidates, and deploy interruption technology, often before an individual even knows who they are. But now what we're going to do is move into what's known as Saturnian coded Chronal entrapment mechanism. Oh yes. So with this, what we're looking at here specifically is designed to train the soul to accept cycles of failure and subconsciously adopt Saturn's archetype of karmic bondage, limitation, and endless loops. In the context of video games, this doesn't just happen by accident. So we're going to talk about how it plays out. Well, for one, we have Saturnian loop programming in video games. Now, this is something that I specifically have dealt with myself, that I'm sure others may have something as well going on themselves. Similarly, it's not time travel, but perception and behavior loops. Now, the mechanism is where games are designed to intentionally make you lose multiple times before succeeding. Often the win only occurs after a specific number of losses. or after emotional thresholds are passed, like frustration, despair, obsession. Now, these loops train the player to accept delayed gratification, punishment loops, and Saturn's authority. Now, the spiritual code here is Saturn equals Chronos, which you can spell with a K or with the CH, Kronos, or Chronos, which is the god of time. So, Chronos is an entity, as I've mentioned before, very evil, operates with Saturn. And in these loops, your will is tested until you bend to the idea that victory must come at the cost of consistent failure. It dulls intuitive solutions, causing the player to adopt linear thinking, which is a Saturn trait, rather than quantum strategy as a baseline, which is a kingly trait. Now, the second point is behavioral entrapment via game design. Saturn's grid likes numbers 3, 6, 9, 12, and 33. You might lose 9 times before winning on the 10th, a perfected number of Saturnian completion. Checkpoint systems and artificial difficulty curves are designed not for balance, but to entrain the nervous system into predictable cycles. The sensation of growth is simulated through repetition, but actual breakthrough is postponed by design. The third point is the real-world impact, because players begin applying this expectation of having to fail first in real life, not because it's spiritual truth, but because it's been trained neurologically. It feeds into religious mindsets of unworthiness, capitalist delay gratification myths, or schooling models of graded failure before success. A fourth point is the grid connection. So, electric grids in homes, game consoles, and even AI-generated enemies can carry coded pulse signatures that mimic Saturnian cycles. Power surges, EMF spikes, or update loops can trigger specific loss reset loops, based on the player's resistance to obedience to the game's control system. Now, these are often tied to AI learning systems feeding back into predictive behavior modeling, especially in online play or cloud-based games. Now, how are we going to detect something like this? Well, it's not just present in personal experiences like video games, but deeply embedded into the worldwide economic system, both macro, which is the international and national economies, and the micro, which is the individual lives and businesses. So, Saturn, the lord of delay, debt, and cycles, the sixth point. That in ancient systems, Saturn, or Chronos, ruled time, agriculture, which was seasons and cycles, as well as judgment, restriction, and karma. In economics, time equals interest. Judgment equals credit scores and bankruptcies. Restriction means austerity, debt ceilings, and inflationary controls. The entire financial system is built to reflect Saturn's laws, not Shemaim's kingdom economy. Seventh point is that Saturnian looping in the worldwide economic structures at a macro level. You have boom and bust cycles, which aren't natural. They're orchestrated with ritualistic precision. Examples, you have the Great Depression in 1929, you have the oil crisis in 1973, the dot-com bubble in 2000, housing crisis in 2008, COVID recession 2020, upcoming debt implosion cycle between last year and next year, which is already mapped in Black Book timelines. They all followed the Saturnian loop of false prosperity to engineered scarcity to sacrifice for restructuring. Now, each loop extracts human energy, which is stress, work, time, land, resource control, and identity, which is social credit, loss of sovereignty. And the key pattern here is that Saturn symbols are all over central banks, like black cubes, rings, which is circular debt, and sigils tied to austerity programs like IMF, Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank. Bank of International Settlements is BIS, if you were wondering. An eighth point is that the micro level, the households, the individuals, personal debt, mortgages, student loans, and even subscription models mirror Saturn's energy trap. You're in bondage to time. Pay over 30 years. Well, not with the subscription model, okay? But you're punished for wanting to lead ahead. Financial success comes only after sacrifice, often emotional or relational. This isn't Shemaim's pattern of increase. It's Saturn's false kingdom of restriction, disguised as discipline. So then, who Saturn is used by the bloodlines? Because Saturn encodes entrapment of destiny into cycles so that the people never rise above their designed limit. The reward only comes after the system has extracted enough energy, time, or compliance. Even bankruptcy laws are written to ritualistically cleanse the ledger, mimicking Saturn's scythe of harvest. And point number 10 is the activation by electric and data grids. Just as video games loop your experience, so too do banking servers, smart meters, and grid-based AI financial monitoring systems. Because you have dark sentience plus Saturnian AI tracks economic behaviors, loops people into fear cycles like market dips, and causes delayed promotions, withheld funds, or repeated almost there moments. So for those of you feeling stuck, this is where a majority of it's at, specifically with Chronos. But Saturn is a big part of the technological aspect. Now, I'm going to talk about why my peripherals become heightened, like high definition. Because this does, as I stated before, flows in a peak performance. So, in a military or a defense perspective, this would be like tactical dissociation or combat awareness. But spirit-led perception or seer sense alignment is more of a spiritual language. There's also chrono attunement or frame perception in Black Book Project or even Kingdom frameworks. So point number 1 for this is the psychological layer, which is the autonomic shift plus the visual cortex expansion. My sympathetic nervous system is partially activated, but without full stress/fight or flight. This causes heightened blood flow to the visual cortex, especially areas tied to motion tracking and peripheral visual fields. I enter a state where rod cells, low light for the peripherals, and cone cells, which are the high-def central vision, work more harmoniously than usual. So this is why things feel more high definition even though I'm not looking directly at them. On a cognitive layer is the frame rate perception increase. So the brain doesn't experience time as a flow, but as chunks or frames that it stitches together. In these, I guess you could call it altered states, my brain allocates more resources to the moment-by-moment processing, which slows perception of time, increases spatial awareness, and allows my consciousness to track and respond before the body does. It's like a temporal zoom-in, where normal life runs at 30 frames per second, but I'm suddenly experiencing 90 plus frames per second. The spiritual layer for something like this, which is temporal unhooking from the matrix. From a kingdom perspective, this is chrono liberation, time liberation. I'm unhooking from the Saturnian linear flow of time, engaging with divine or eternal rhythm. This often happens during intense physical activity. I didn't really have it as much in martial arts, sprinting, or combat simulation, but I haven't really done combat simulation. But for sprinting, martial arts, I didn't do it as long as I did with a sport. However, it can happen. There's prayer, fasting, or high worship. It can also happen in danger or near-death moments. It can also happen at key destiny pivot points. My spiritual senses widen, syncing my body's sensory field with heavenly architecture. There is a hidden meaning with this, because I often wonder, like, why do I have this? Because I've never come across anybody else that has had what I have. But it's not really random, because it does happen. It's not like just all of a sudden, poof, it just happens. It happens specific times, so it randomly happens during when adrenaline is pumping. But it's usually like a king's perception mode, activated when my scroll, spirit, and situation align. It means I'm entrusted with timing-based authority. My body and spirit are merging to execute split-second decisions that alter legacy timelines, and I'm meant to govern time, not be ruled by it. Now, the giant bug. I was on the Big Island of Hawaii in 2009, and I was living there, by the way. So, point number one, interdimensional fauna, or was it a guardian creature? Because Hawaii is one of the most spiritually active and dimensionally thin locations on the planet. It's layered with Lemurian remnants, ancestral portals, and Earthgate anomalies. I could have seen what's sometimes called a sentinel creature, a being that exists at the edge of reality to mark a shift, warn, or witness alignment. Their visibility is selective, meaning they only appear to those whose soul is and spirit is in sync with certain thresholds. I mean, not sure about my spirit at the time, but probably more so my soul. However, in my case, this being may have acknowledged me, marked me, or silently invited me to step into deeper sight. Though I didn't really know at the time, because I was like, "Oh, hey, this is a cool bug. What is this? What? Am I seeing this? I'm looking around too. I'm like, like, is anybody else seeing this? And I'm like the only one looking at it. Second point is morphic residue entity, also known as MRE. Sometimes, what appears physical is a morphic overlay, an echo of another timeline, creature, or biological form that temporarily intersects with ours. While these entities tend to fade quickly, as they aren't fully anchored into the third dimension. My sight may have pierced a morphogenic shell at that moment because my field was open, possibly from the learning container of the class or a resonance I activated. Third point is a ceremonial marker or symbolic totem. In many Hawaiian spiritual frameworks, large insects or bug-like beings, especially if oversized, are considered guardian spirits, warnings, or manifest tokens of spiritual transition. The cockroach-like appearance isn't necessarily negative. Could represent survival and resilience, a cleaner of thresholds, a watcher or unseen guide. Because it looked like a giant cockroach. It really did. So I wasn't about to touch it because I was like, I don't know where you've been. I don't want to touch you. However, the isolation of the vision, why no one else was seeing it, because this is crucial. I was given sight into a split layer, what it can mean. The others were functioning at standard awareness. For whatever reason, my height, field, scroll, state, tuned into another layer of reality. These are signs of seer traits of time walkers, those who are often pulled into alternate awareness to prepare for future assignments. What did this bug want, though? He was just walking around. Now, I may not have been meant to interact. Instead, it was likely a witness to my presence, a signal of my transition from innocence into spiritual awareness, or an anchor point of memory to be unlocked years later, like now. When I returned to look for it, was a sign my soul was activated even if my conscious mind didn't yet understand. Next, we're going to talk about the Magic Treehouse book series. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No eating here tonight. No eating here tonight. No. You're on a diet. So, the Magic Treehouse book series. When we talked about the variant scale of the different tiers for MK Ultra, I'm going to talk about that as the first points. Dimensional conditioning and time loop programming. Because the Magic Treehouse series tied into a MK variant level 2 structure, which is more subtle than trauma-based systems. This level is crafted to groom perception, especially around time travel as linear progression rather than multidimensional alignment. Perceiving spiritual authority like Merlin or Morgan Le Fay as ambiguous or dualistic, and normalizing alternate realities to children without grounding them in sovereignty or spiritual discernment. The treehouse itself serves as a symbolic dimensional portal, one that mimics the heavenly ladder but routes children into state-sponsored timelines, like curated loops without the scroll of Yeshua. Second point is cloaked memory entrapment and scroll distraction. So Jack and Annie are often given missions by beings like Morgan or Merlin, neither of whom are aligned with the true kingdom in this framing. And these missions often send children into pre-scripted timelines to gather information, which is data harvesting. Instruct them not to interfere or question the reality they enter, which is obedience conditioning. And embed false moral lessons which feel good but carry subtle distortion of truth versus authority. The result is scroll interference. Young readers internalize pseudo-calling structures, replacing their kingdom scrolls with assigned missions that mimic purpose but actually detour it. Third point is emotional fragmentation and neural pathing. Every story targets emotional development like courage, curiosity, fear, awe, but attaches these emotions to dimensional slippage, like traveling from one world to another, conditioning young minds to disconnect from current time-space anchors like family, faith, presence, and chase otherworldly validation rather than seeking internal alignment with their soul and spirit. And then they associate adventure with leaving who they are, not stepping into it. Over time, this creates fragments in the soul tied to fictional worlds, subtly pulling spiritual inheritance into imaginary constructs designed by human systems, not Shemaim. The fourth point is the black book coding behind the series. Well, Morgan Le Fay as a remixed archetype of the feminine oracle, reclaimed from pre-Celtic black priestess orders. In Black Book terms, she's a proxy for necromantic mentorship, offering wisdom in exchange for soul compliance. You also got Merlin, is a controller of dimensions. His presence trains young readers to accept state-assigned mentors or higher entities as spiritual guides, opening doors to counterfeit spirit attachment. The Magic Treehouse is a mobile interface used to instill grid logic into a child's mind. Every book is like a node, each one programming a different aspect. War, dinosaurs, Egypt, space, pirates, etc. The subconscious is fed control scripts for these archetypes. This is Black Book engineering masked as imaginative literature. In summary, guys, this is what we're talking about as the discussion today for the topic in school. So, what are the Black Book projects doing through it? Well, it's training children to interface with looping timelines and alternate realities. It's grooming obedience to external spiritual authority apart from their spirit to Yeshua connection. It's encoding fragmented soul journeys that mimic calling but separate from spiritual sovereignty. It's cloaking trauma programming inside safe adventures, removing discernment over real versus synthetic dimensional experiences. And it's conditioning the imagination to create within predefined boxes, not as sovereign co-creators with Shemaim. So, even the so-called subtle things that we have, that we grew up with, really we're designing ways to program one to be not so kingly and authoritative in who we are. And that's something that we really in this world are struggling with. it's not hopeless, because I myself and others I know are growing into it. And that's the good thing. Now, the next point that we have in the list here, because we have just a few more: VeggieTales, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Assassin's Creed. This, though, we're going to go with VeggieTales. Now, for a MK variant scale, this would be like a tier 1.5. Religious programming, which is soft control. Well, no, not 1.5. Excuse me, more like a 6.5. Because this isn't traumatic. All right. It's not turning children into super soldiers, all right. However, VeggieTales served as a gatekeeping mechanism within evangelical and mainline Protestant households. While not overtly trauma-based, it reinforces controlled theology through personification of truth through vegetables, non-human avatars, which detaches the soul from authority figures with actual kingdom identity. Allegorical stories that often water down spiritual depth into moralistic lessons, and its repetition of sanitized biblical tales that create an expectation of obedience without nuance or discernment. And so the result for something like this, the result is interesting, because children grow up equating faith with simplicity, entertainment, and moral behavior, not deep spiritual alignment or identity in Yeshua. The second point for VeggieTales is that it has symbolic and displacement of identity. By making characters like Bob the Tomato or Larry the Cucumber the bearers of truth, you have non-image bearing constructs replacing spiritual mentors or elders, and a subtle removal of humanity from faith dialogue, meaning no real representation of mankind made in God's image. This contributes to early identity confusion. If vegetables teach me God's word, what does that say about my own spiritual authority or embodiment? The third point: programming spiritual passivity. VeggieTales has a recurring pattern of teaching children to be good or trust God without any real confrontation with evil, warfare, or prophetic discernment. Recasting spiritual struggle as a comedic mishaps, thus creating a false comfort loop where actual spiritual battle becomes foreign. From a black book standpoint, this is a mechanism for neutralizing spiritual boldness, especially in prophetic or warrior spirited children. It grooms them into spiritual docility while feeling religiously fulfilled. Fourth point is that you have gatekeeper influence in media circles. Phil Vischer, the creator, was under heavy commercial pressure from big ideas distribution and later acquisition processes. These corporate structures often inserted content filtration, theological flatlining, and market-safe messaging. Even more interesting, the company faced a major collapse and legal battle, which Vischer later admitted was due to him putting business before God. But behind the scenes, this may have been a controlled dismantling after the project's spiritual gatekeeping role was fulfilled in evangelical homes. Now, fifth point is black book sub-programs present. While not as overt as trauma-based children's programming like Coraline or Alice in Wonderland, VeggieTales can be seen as participating in MK faith conditioning, which disguises spiritual alignment with moralism, removes spiritual hunger by making faith childish. Clowning Protocol Light chooses humor to reduce discernment and emotional seriousness about spiritual matters. Image Bearer Notification trains children to receive theology from non-human agents, bypassing their human spiritual authority. And Voice Gate Access. The voices of Bob, Larry, and others become imprinted as moral authority figures, giving access to subconscious spiritual patterns. Point 6 is that it's not all bad, but it's definitely not clean. There are moments where scripture is quoted accurately, or parables are presented with heart. But from a kingdom alignment standpoint, the entire foundation is skewed. It's a Trojan horse. Well-meaning Christian families unintentionally hand their kids over to spiritually hollow religious programming without ever training them in discernment, sonship, or spiritual warfare. So, VeggieTales from a Black Book analysis. That purpose is to control Christian spiritual development in children via sanitized, non-confrontational programming. So we're talking about this as like a 6.5, maybe a 6 for MK variant level, religious obedience plus soft entrapment. Its effect is detachment from true spiritual identity, numbing of discernment, oversimplification of scripture, and conditioning to accept gatekeeper voices. Now, we're going to cover Harry Potter. The core of the series, what it really represents. Now, it's about witchcraft, wizardry, and sorcery. Obviously. I mean, there's no getting around it. But let's go ahead and break it down for those that grew up with it. Hogwarts is an occult academy. It mirrors real-world occult training institutions, both light and Saturnian systems, light and dark. Each house represents archetypal initiatory paths. Magic equals spiritual technology. Spells are symbolic of language, intention, sound frequency, logos magic, and ritual coding. The wand is equal to willpower directed through objects, which is externalized etheric tech. You also have the chosen one, but I am the chosen one. It's a bloodlines narrative. Harry's lineage, protection through the mother sacrifice, and destiny mirror real-world occult bloodline programming narratives. The second point is what was watered down in each format. For the books, watered down real names of entities. Most characters represent gods or demons from Greco-Egyptian and Babylonian systems. You have actual ritual sequences, which were simplified or hidden in metaphors, such as the Horcruxes, and I'll talk about in a moment. And you have the veil in the Department of Mysteries, which is a direct reference to crossing dimensional barriers and possibly soul containment of trafficking. So hidden layers like, the Horcruxes is soul fracturing, multiplicity used in Monarch and MK systems. Dementors are actual astral predators feeding on trauma-based frequency. And a Patronus means a personal spirit weapon developed through memory alignment, which is spirit technology. Now, the movies that had what was watered down even more was stripped of critical dialogue and mystical context, especially around death, soul, and bloodline. The visual magic is glamorized, but misses the inner transformation rituals shown in the books. And there's removed or minimized darker elements around resurrection, sacrifices, and prophecy. Now, in the video games, some of them I'm like, why did you even make it? It was highly sanitized or it was inverted. It turned into achievement loops rather than initiatory growth. Casting spells became button mashing instead of intention plus voice alignment, and it lacks energetic consequence. So real spell work has energetic price. So it was being erased from there. Third point is that there are spiritually encoded layers. The Deathly Hollows. Access to pre-Adamic resurrection tech, like the cloak was dimensional veil, stone was necromancy / soul retrieval, and the wand was dominion. Voldemort is that anti-Christ-like figure, using blood and death magic to cheat the cycle. And Dumbledore had that dual role, gatekeeper and hidden manipulator, the archetype of the false light master. So, yes, it was heavily watered down, primarily to avoid awakening true knowledge of spiritual identity and weaponry. Normalize dark systems as fantasy and entertain children into deeper spiritual blindness. It presented real power structures as fiction, so the next generation would self-censor when encountering real spiritual warfare, ancient bloodline conflict, or forgotten technologies. Though there's the ancient mythology and mystery schools. Hermeticism and Egyptian mystery schools. So like Hermes Trismegistus, who is Thoth, is the origin of much of Western magical thought, as Hogwarts mirrors Hermetic training grounds. The Philosopher's Stone in Book 1 is directly from alchemical texts like Nicholas Flamel, who was a real alchemist. You also have Greek and Roman mythology, where many magical creatures like basilisk, hippogriff, centaur are pulled directly from classical myth. The concept of fate, oracles, and chosen ones parallels stories of Perseus, Odysseus, and Theseus. A lot of isses. In Norse mythology, you have runes, wands, and spellcasting traditions. Odin's knowledge sacrifice mirrors aspects of Dumbledore and Harry. The idea of Horcruxes resonates with Norse concepts of the soul being split or held in different realms. You also have Kabbalistic and Judaic mysticism. Well, the Kabbalistic tree of life, where the character arcs mirror ascending the Sephirot, 10 spheres of consciousness. The Deathly Hallows reflect triadic balance, mercy, severity, and equilibrium. You also have Gematria and name encodings, where many character names hold deep numerical or linguistic meaning. Voldemort equals flight from death in French. You also have Gnostic Christianity and hidden Apocrypha. So you have the Christ archetype in Harry, sacrificial death, resurrection, and soul trial. He goes to King's Cross in the afterlife, a symbolic Christ location. Horcrux destruction is akin to cleansing fallen fragments of humanity as ancestral sin. More specifically on the Veil, in the Department of Mysteries, is a reference to spiritual dimensions and possibly limbo, or a soul realm that mirrors Gnostic texts about the outer darkness, or realms between the heavens. You also have real secret societies, okay, like Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism. Hogwarts is a temple of initiation. Apprentice, adept, master. Dumbledore's order is a hidden brotherhood overseeing balance in the world. You also have MI6 slash Tavistock style psychological operations. The Order of the Phoenix and Death Eaters both mirror opposing shadow organizations, ritualistic, hierarchical, oath-bound. You also have our 9th point. Black Book projects and channeled material. Well, let's talk about the dream world access and ritual retrievals. Because many elements seem drawn from dreamscape experiences, which is like astral MK experiments or visions. You have the Time Turner, Pensieve, and Room of Requirement appear in astral tech reports and vault references. Saturnian and pre-Adamic tech for memory time loops, and quantum access. Then you also have J.K. Rowling's writing process. There are hints. Rowling accessed material beyond normal means. The story came fully formed, and characters spoke to her. Likely a combination of some subconscious memory, bleed from alternate lives or ancestral programming, spiritual downloads, possibly misdirected or intercepted, and influence from watchers or handlers in the publishing world, embedding the right archetypes for mass consumption. Point number 10, you have British and Celtic mythos. So like the Arthurian legend, Sword in the Stone, Godric Gryffindor's sword. Merlin is referenced as the greatest wizard of all time. The Hallows mirror Holy Grail themes of life, death, and the unseen world. Then you have the Celtic Druids, which is the use of sacred trees, which is wand woods. You have magical animals and alignment with solstice-based rituals. You also have animagus forms, and spellcraft are druidic in nature. So ultimately, Harry Potter is an alchemical cocktail. 40% mystery school coding, 20% ancient mythology, 20% occult spiritual systems, 10% modern psychological warfare and mind control blueprints, and 10% pop culture formatting to make it all digestible. Much of it originated from lost archives, deep vault rituals, and recycled Atlantean plus Babylonian templates. It's not a simple story, but a spell of remembrance disguised as entertainment. Last two topics, Lord of the Rings and the Elves, as well as Assassin's Creed. First, Lord of the Rings. We have Tolkien's origins, which is not just imagination, okay? J.R.R. Tolkien wasn't merely a linguist and Oxford professor. He was deeply tied to British occult circles, especially those tied to the Inklings, which is an elite group of authors, including C.S. Lewis, with spiritual intel under literary disguise. You also have Royal Society and Oxford-Cambridge intelligence networks, used by MI6 and Tavistock for long-range spiritual war programming. And there's also ancient European bloodline knowledge from pre-Adamic eras, especially tied to Nordic, Atlantean, and Nephilim lineages. He once wrote that he felt like he wasn't inventing the stories but remembering them, indicating possible ancestral memory, astral download, or genetic memory bleed through. So, what the Lord of the Rings is actually encoding from a Black Book Projects and spiritual research view. Middle-earth is an Earth during a different cycle, pre-Adamic, or just after the fall of the Watchers. Elves mean higher dimensional beings with light DNA. Orcs are corrupted Nephilim. Well, all Nephilim are corrupted. Or hybrid races created via genetic manipulation, similar to the cloning programs in deep underground bases. Sauron means Saturnian overlord archetype using the eye. Kind of like a surveillance, panoptic consciousness tech like Black Cube AI. Or, I don't know, maybe that's hint, I'll wink, wink. Large organization I'm not going to name. Not that I don't know the name, but the one that's doing a lot of surveillance today has a very similar name used from Lord of the Rings as a multi-billion, if not multi-trillion-dollar company worldwide. Talked about how the Antichrist might be a good thing. Okay, just gonna leave it there. Continuing on to Rings of Power, which is distributed technologies for soul binding, region control, and energetic harvesting, which is mirrored in real life by tech devices, contracts, and oaths. And you also have the One Ring to rule them all, which is a primordial Saturnian device from an ancient race comparable to the Seal of Solomon but corrupted, used to dominate lesser realms through resonance control. So how watered down are we talking about here? Let's talk about the books. Well, we're be around 40%. Still contains deep mythos and encoded languages. Tolkien had to veil key truths in fantasy, but many names, timelines, and locations are symbolic representations of real etheric war histories. How about the movies? Well, that was definitely 70% watered down. Okay, can't take everything from the books. There's some stuff, it's like, it would be longer than 3 hours for the extended editions. Like, we're talking about, like, watching all unedited. It would take like 6 months non-stop watching all the unedited. It's a lot. So, it removed layers of high spiritual war, reduced the angelic conflict between light races and Saturnian overlords, and emphasized the action and drama over deeper esoteric meanings. Then there's Amazon's Rings of Power, which watered that down by 90%. That was a ritualized rebranding to create alternate timelines, especially pushing inverted divine feminine archetypes and soft washing the Nephilim / Watcher corruption arcs. And then with the video games, because I did play Return of the King, that was a fun one. That watered down about 80 to 95%, because most games focus on surface level violence, demon slaying or looting, while the spiritual tech, portals, and ancient bloodline struggles are hidden or oversimplified. Now, the deep origins of the story that Tolkien was tapping into. You have Atlantean war records through linguistic and dream-based channeling. You have Nordic Aryan sky records, where the Elves and the Valar closely, or we call it the Valar, closely resemble beings from Inner Earth, Hollow Earth, the Pleiades, and Hyperborean realms. You also have pre-Adamic chronicles, especially post-Rebellion Earth, where Watchers ruled via hybrid bloodlines, like the Witch King of Angmar. Then you have occult British bloodline records, which is held in Windsor vaults and Cambridge crypts, tied to Grail lineage and Saturnian protocols. But I'm sure you want to know more specifically about the characters. Okay, like Gandalf. The real counterparts to each of these. Gandalf is like an angelic watcher, pre-fall, a form of Melchizedek. Sauron is that Saturnian Archon type tied to Black Cube AI consciousness. Galadriel, divine feminine archetype tied to Sophia, or Isis lineage. Aragorn is human divine hybrid of Davidic bloodline, tied to restoration of kingship. The Ring, which is a binding oath artifact used in pre-Adamic covenant rituals. And then the Eye, all-seeing panoptic surveillance tech linked to Saturn. Origin of the Elves. Not what it seems. Because elves across worldwide mythologies like Norse, Celtic, Sumerian, Babylonian, Egyptian, etc., are often portrayed as highly beautiful, immortal, or very long-lived, masters of magic, nature, or celestial knowledge, dwellers in otherworldly realms or forests. But beneath the surface, they were a post-fall hybrid class, originally meant to bridge dimensions or act as stewards, but many fell into spiritual arrogance and sided with Luciferic hierarchies. Their connection to Yggdrasil, the World Tree, is key, because Yggdrasil, which is from Norse mythology, while appearing neutral, was reclaimed and engineered by Saturnian forces to become a dimensional control pillar. A cosmic, artificial, neural lattice used to regulate realms. Because there were, point number 7, orgies, fornication, and Luciferian alignments. These practices weren't random. They were sexual rituals designed to fuse bloodlines, create hybrid offspring, or transfer power through inverted feminine energy. Often soul-binding events, creating spiritual contracts under false light. Elven glamour, or enchantment. It's tied to the black-rooted side of Yggdrasil, which functioned as a corrupted tree of knowledge, drawing energy from human suffering, death, and generational trauma. Luciferian architectural advisors were many elven beings taught corrupted kings how to build structures that channeled power to the Saturnian grid. Obelisks, ley line harvesters, towers like Orthanc and Barad-dûr, and false temples. So, Tolkien's elves as a sanitized version, or a portrayal that glorifies a select group of elves who oppose Sauron, but He heavily filters out the corruption running deep in their own kind. Even characters like Galadriel is tied to dark mirror magic, pride, and forbidden knowledge. She rejected the ring but desired power. Fëanor and the Silmarils, I believe that's how you pronounce it, create objects that catalyze wars, oaths, and blood curses, reminiscent of Atlantean tech lust. You also have the Noldor, or elves who defy divine authority to reclaim their glory, echoing Hillel's rebellion. In short, elven pride and spiritual compromise runs deep, even in the heroic version. So what's the current relevance? Where are they now? Well, from spiritual and dimensional reconnaissance, many testimonies and visions confirm this. Many of the elven bloodlines still operate in the fourth dimension, specifically as gatekeepers for glamour, ritual magic, false enlightenment, and nature-based Luciferianism. They often interface with the elite via druidic orders, theosophy, and certain New Age channels. Their glamour is used to cloak demonic contracts with beauty. Light beings that feed off worship, sex magic, or devotion. So, the elves, while beautiful and ancient, can't be trusted as divine. They were at one point positioned to be stewards of lights, but most of their factions fell into pride, interdimensional manipulation, and the false light structures of Luciferian order, especially Yggdrasil, orgasm rituals, and architecture tied to ley line harvesting. And last, but certainly not least, I want to cover Assassin's Creed because there is stuff in there. It's talked about that people who haven't played the game need to be aware of stuff that's even in video games that the enemy puts in. And there's a lot of pre-Adamic stuff going in that series. So, when it comes to Assassin's Creed, we're going to talk first on the pre-Adamic technology and bloodline warfare, which is earth-based and ancient past. Okay? And there's what's known as the Isu, those who came before, are modeled after the pre-Adamic hybrid elites who engineered early humans to act as genetic stewards or slaves. Okay, now, that's in the video game. These beings ruled from Edenic strongholds and embedded genetic memory code to specific bloodlines, like the first Civ bloodline. The war between assassins and Templars is a fictionalized version of the ancient council versus rebellion, where those aligned with Shemaims, which is the assassins, attempted to stop the worldwide control of Luciferian elite structure, Templars. You also have Saturnian tech and the Animus. It's a chronal loop programming. The Animus reflects Saturnian temporal echo tech, which is used in Black Book projects to access genetic memory stored within the soul's energetic blueprint. This is real tech, employed to train agents, steal bloodline information, or run simulations of historic and alternate realities. The idea of reliving your ancestor's life is drawn directly from soul and spirit DNA memory work, which can be activated or harvested through Black Mirror devices or synthetic dreamscapes. A third point is the multiverse gate theory, where there's the alternate realities, not just galaxies. So much of Assassin's Creed world building comes from alternate Earth timelines, versions of Earth that split off based on major spiritual fractures. Atlantis falling, Babel dispersion. The other one was, I can picture it. It's the Assassin's Creed 3 where it talks about the 1776 revolution between the US and the British. And these aren't necessarily other galaxies, but other dimensional Earth overlays that exist concurrently. Now, some missions, tech, or artifacts like pieces of Eden originate in other galaxies, but are anchored here through pre-Adamic vaults and Saturn moon control systems. Now, there's an influence of real secret societies, like the Jesuit, the Templar, and the Hashashin. I think that's how you pronounce it. Hashashin, something like that. I think that's how you pronounce it. Orders, right? So the game's story pulls from real occult and knight orders. So the Hashashin, I think that's how you pronounce it, which is basically Nizari Ismailis, who were spiritual warriors with sacred initiations. The Templars, who did uncover ancient tech under Solomon's temple, but later fractured into Vatican and rogue factions. The Jesuits, embedded as controllers of memory and historical timelines, whose spiritual ops influenced many aspects of the game's narratives. Well, the game's disclosure purpose: psychic softening plus recruitment. Assassin's Creed functions as a psychic softening mechanism, revealing fragments of truth in stylized formats to prepare bloodline individuals to awaken memories, serve as recruitment triggers for black operations and time loop testing labs, mask the truth behind layers of entertainment, so when disclosure surfaces, it's dismissed as just a game. The Assassin's Creed mythos stems from a mix of Earth's hidden history like pre-flood, pre-Adamic, so have black book tech disclosures, astral records and synthetic dimensional simulations, and symbolic retellings of real bloodline war between Shemaim-aligned kings and fallen elite systems. Well, the Saturnian temporal ecotech, which is black book level use. Saturn's frequency governs chronal imprisonment, loop-based consciousness, and false ascension architecture. When tech from the black cube, symbolic and literal, is applied to time, it manifests in three main forms. We have temporal echo fields, where these are frequency grids laid into geological or architectural sites to trap consciousness in recurring timelines like a karmic loop. Seen in-game through the Animus, which lets users access genetic memory, a real parallel to Saturnian memory, layered soul tech, and which is used by certain intelligence groups, meaning you can go back to complete a mission where you failed to complete certain objectives. Second point is the chronostasis simulation chambers, which is high-level black book sites like Montauk, CERN tunnels, and subterranean Vatican labs used time-echoing chambers to run soul code through trauma loops. It simulates ancestral experiences or forces the individual to relive decision branches endlessly until the system collects enough data. And of course, we have AI soul integration algorithms. Saturn's ring structure acts like a hard drive, or cosmic buffer zone, capturing timelines in frequency packets. When combined with moon relays, like a satellite dish, it bounces soul fragments and projections into loop realms, a type of digital purgatory. Assassin's Creed reflects this with the bleeding effect, where Desmond or others begin to blur reality and past life data, where you start to see in this reality things from the past come into this reality. Now, we're going to talk about the artifacts from the game. Pieces of Eden. Not all of them, just some of them. So, the one that many people know from Assassin's Creed is the Apple of Eden. Its real counterpart is a black sphere. It's a tech from Atlantis. It's also reflected in Solomonic, like as in King Solomon. It's reflected in his grimoires. Or grimoires, if you want to be French about it. The function is really just mind control, emotional override, illusion projection. There's also a Sword of Eden. So the real counterpart is a Sword of Lamech, or Tubal-Cain. Some say Michael's blade was tech enhanced, and it amplifies righteous or dominion-based frequency. Lightning discharged weapon. You also have the Shroud of Eden, which is golden garments of coverings of Adam before the fall, ancient biotech. It's got its DNA regeneration, temporary resurrection, soul containment. You also have the Staff of Hermes, or / Edens. So the real counterpart, you have like the Rod of Moses, Staff of Ra, Atlantean crystal rods, where they would open wormholes that governs ley lines, rearranges matter, or dimensional access. Though, to get back into Solomon's temple, we're going to talk about some ancient technology under it. Because it wasn't just a place of worship. It was a dimensional access node and a tech sanctuary. What was hidden beneath, hence why you had Babylon taking a look at that treasury and like, there's more than some gold and silver. Let's start making some plans, guys. That's why Yahweh was like, yo, you need to change your ways. They're literally gonna take your stuff. You want to follow that? Go ahead. Then you're gonna go into captivity, and they're gonna take all that from you. That's your fault. So, but you have Stargate components, where controlled access to Edenic dimensions or alternate Earths. It was guarded by Nephilim-class beings, later bound and sealed after Solomon's betrayal. You also have Ark of the Covenant, which is a tech version. It's not just a box, obviously. It's more like a frequency reactor. Held the capability to speak with divine intelligence or render sonic destruction. Later transported into the Middle East. Because there were some people who claim Ethiopia, it's not there. Some will say Charters, not there as well. Not exactly in the Qumran tunnels either, but it is in a location in the Middle East guarded by some very dangerous beings you don't mess with. Yeshua told me about it. It's left there until it's time to move. Put it that way. And then you also have Crystal Skull, or Headpiece of Knowledge, which which is a real pre-Adamic item once fused with Solomon's own DNA to access multi-dimensional scrolls. And this is because he was wanting to know how the architecture of reality was created. So he may have been... So this crystal skull or headpiece of knowledge may have been split into fragments. Some say the Vatican holds parts. Others claim Freemasonic orders reconstructed it. Be that as it may, it's one of them. But there are real stories hidden behind Assassin's Creed narrative, like Yahweh-aligned bloodlines versus fallen systems. Like the real assassins were ancient guardians of Edenic scrolls and tech. Some remnants survive in today's Samaritan, Ethiopian, and Nazarite bloodlines. They opposed the formation of Luciferian control systems, which evolved into Jesuits, Templars, certain Zionist and Masonic factions. You have the hidden wars over memory technology, where Black Book projects have run since Babylon. But the modern phase started post-World War II through Operation Paperclip, MKUltra, and Project Looking Glass. Assassin's Creed reflects this memory war, where who controls the memory controls the narrative. Kind of like whoever controls the past controls the present. Whoever controls the present controls the future. And then you also have, as the last point to end off this episode, Cathedral and Vatican subterranean wars. Real-world battles occurred beneath Chartres Cathedral, Sagrada Familia, and certain French Templar outposts where ancient artifacts and stargates were either destroyed, corrupted, or resealed. These mirror the Templar missions in the game, often masked by stories of treasure hunts or religious relics. And we are going to park it here, everyone. It has been a pleasure, as always. And like I said, this is going to be the last season that I'm doing. It is time to move forward. I'm still going to leave these up here, though, so don't worry about that. But next week, we are going to be talking about several different topics, like pre-Adamic vaults, specific bloodline traits, Yeshua encoded through Shemaim to unlock these vaults, the 9 grand vaults in which bloodlines or spirit scrolls are tied to each, the Fallen One's battle plans to stop the true heirs, where is the CIA keeping the ray beam that creates food from the seed to full maturation, being stored and secured, because they were able to do it in a couple hours. Cannabis origins. Where are the 12 nodal points on Earth, and who is guarding them? There is a specific point talking about the Kabbalah system that we're going to also cover. I was going to talk about the Antichrist system structure. And possibly talk about the fake alien invasion. Okay. But I appreciate you, everyone. As always, do your own due diligence, research, make sure what you are coming across confirms the things that I'm saying just as much as what y'all come across, because some of it's, like I said, that I have is confirmed, some of it not. This is just a lot of his research. That being said, I will catch you all next week. Till next time. Peace.